Hey, this is Wayne with On Time Appliance out of Richardson, Texas. Today a customer brought us in a Danby Wine Cooler standalone model DWC 166BLSRH-1. Today we're going to go through the steps and the procedures on how to diagnose and then repair the machine. And we'll start from ground level and I'll work our way up from the very beginning levels of how to diagnose this without any tools, without having gauges, and then we'll just go up into the advanced level of how to actually pump down the Freon, weigh in the charge, and get it all professionally done right. So let's get started. Okay, so let's begin diagnosing this thing. What I would first do walking up on this wine cooler would be to see if all the electronics are working right. Are the fans running, both top and bottom for dual zone? Is your display displaying the right temperature? And is all your switches working? On this one, all of that is working. The customer says that it's not cooling at all. Most of the time, if a wine cooler is not cooling at all, it's going to be more of your seal system problem. Say your compressor, or it's out of Freon, or your cold control is just not letting it come on at all. If it was to be a more electrical problem, you would notice one zone being cooler than the other, or it starts to warm up slowly. But more than likely, if it's just totally not cooling, then it's going to be more in the compressor side of things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it around. We're going to get down to the compressor and we're going to see what's going on. We're going to see if the compressor is even on, and if it is on, how much Freon is in the unit, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now that I have this thing turned around, what I'm going to check for now is to make sure my condenser fan's running, which it is, and to see if my compressor's running. I can feel it vibrating. If you want to double check that, you can throw your meter on it and see if 120 volts is going to it, and if it is, and you feel it vibrating, then you know your compressor is trying to pump at least. So what I'm going to do now is check the low side pressure and see what it's running at. It should run right around 10 to 15 pounds of pressure. Let's see what we're at here. See, we're all the way negative about 22. See if I can focus that in. If that'll focus, if you can see that. There it is. We're right about negative 22. So it is pretty much all the way out of Freon. So what this unit's going to need is a Freon charge. So since there's no Freon in it, there's nothing I can recover. So I'm going to throw a vacuum pump on it, which pulls out all the air, gets all the contaminants, all the liquid out. Run that for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'm going to actually weigh in the charge and fill it back up with Freon. Okay, now for the next part of this step, what we're going to do is grab our charging cable off our gauge. We still have our low side hooked to our gauge. We're going to put it onto our vacuum pump. Go ahead and turn it on. And we're going to open our valve up. We're going to let this pull a vacuum for about 20 to 30 minutes. That's just going to pull all the air, any moisture that's built up in there, so that we have a clear system to start with, so we can start charging our system up with the 134 Freon. Okay, we've had our vacuum pump running for about 30 minutes now. The gauge is reading right at negative 30. That's exactly what you want to see it at, holding strong. What I'm going to do now is take off my low side of the gauge, and we're going to use something called Super Seal Advanced. It's a stop leak. I've been using it for years. Seems to work really good on these small systems. So what I'm going to do is screw it on here. turn the unit on so the compressor comes on. And we're going to open it up. I recommend going slow on this and not dump the whole can in at one time because it could clog your system up. Just a little bit at a time. And for small leaks, this thing just seems to seal it up every time. If you got a bigger leak, then that's when you're going to have to get out the leak detector and pinpoint where that leak is, and either weld it or replace the part that's actually leaking. But for most of the time, this stop leak here, it'll do its job. So now the can is empty. Take it off. I'm going to hook my low side of my gauge back onto the service valve. I'm going to take my charging port from my gauges, charging hose rather, and put it on my 134 jug of Freon. And I'm going to set it on my scale. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. Okay, let's turn on the scale. Okay. Since I set the jug on the scale before I turned it on, it's already going to be zeroed out. But if you didn't have it on the scale to begin with, you'd have to tear the weight out of the jug. So what I'm going to do now, let's take my gauges. Okay, now that our scale's all zeroed out, we're ready to start charging the system. This particular system calls for 3.5 ounces of Freon, so I'm going to start adding it in now. You don't want to go too fast with this. I wouldn't bring it up anywhere past 40 psi as you're adding it in. And if you're doing this at home, sometimes the system will pull it in faster than others. Sometimes it'll just go in real slow. This one seems to be pulling it in pretty fast. And always remember when you're working with 134 to add it in as a gas and not a liquid.
Hey, one.
Okay. A little bit more. Okay, now we hit 3.5 ounces. So I'm going to shut my tank off. Turn my scale off. So now that we've charged the system, I'm going to cap it off, let it run, see that it drops temperature, probably keep it over here overnight, and check it again in the morning, see if it's lost anything. If it hasn't lost any Freon and the temperature is running good, it's good to go back to the customer. Okay, it's been sitting overnight now, and as you can see, it's right about 15 pounds of pressure. That's right where I left it yesterday. So if there is a leak in this system still, it's going to be such a micro leak that we'll never be able to find it. So now that we have it all filled up, charged up, it's cooling good, we're just going to put it back together and it'll be good to go. You can try this at home with just automotive Freon 134A. You get a pair of cheap gauges from Home Depot or your nearest hardware store, or you can always give us a call at 214-916-0337. We're out of Richardson, Texas. We run the whole Dallas Metroplex and the Collin County Metroplex. We have a $45 trip charge, or you can always bring it in to us right here at 75 and Arapahoe in Richardson, Texas, 75080. And until next time, thank you for watching.